The human brain relies on sight to navigate the world, but it relies on sound to detect danger. Evolution has trained us to identify every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, and every animal call in our environment. We know what a wolf sounds like. We know what a bear sounds like. But sometimes, deep in the American wilderness, the silence is broken by a noise that has no biological or mechanical source. A noise that triggers a primal instinct to run. We are going to analyze 6 specific auditory phenomena, recorded or reported in the woods of the United States. These are not hallucinations. In some cases, they are recordings that have baffled naval cryptologists and university bioacousticians. The first sound takes us away from the East Coast to the rugged, high-altitude wilderness of the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. This is the mystery of the Sierra Sounds. In 1971, a journalist named Ron Moorhead and a group of hunters set up a camp 8 miles deep into the wilderness. Far from any roads or trails, they were experienced outdoorsmen. They expected to hear coyotes, mountain lions, and bears. What they heard instead has become the holy grail of cryptozoology. They recorded a series of vocalizations that defy classification. Unlike the grunts or howls of an ape, these sounds were complex. They possessed a distinct language structure. The entities and there were clearly more than once seemed to be conversing. The sound is often described as samurai chatter. It is a rapid-fire, guttural, aggressive language that sounds vaguely Japanese or Russian, but is neither. It ranges from deep chest-rattling growls to hyperchet, hysterical whistling. In 1978, these tapes were analyzed by R. Scott Nelson, a retired Navy cryptologic linguist. His job was to transcribe intercepted Soviet codes. Nelson analyzed the Sierra sounds and concluded that they could not be faked. He stated that the vocalizations possessed articulate phonemes, meaning the creatures were using lips, tongues, and a larynx to shape distinct words. The pitch changes within the recordings were too fast for a human to mimic without their voice cracking. Furthermore, the lung capacity required to sustain the volume of the screams was calculated to be significantly larger than that of a human or a bear. To this day, the Sierra sounds remain the only audio evidence of a potential unknown primate language in North America. They are the sounds of something intelligent, arguing in the dark, just outside the light of the campfire. From the biological terror of the West, we travel back to the East Coast, to the coastlines and forests of North Carolina. This is a phenomenon that has been reported for over 150 years. It is known as the Seneca Guns. This is not a creature. It is a violent, atmospheric event. Witnesses describe it as the sound of a massive artillery cannon being fired directly next to their ear, or a sonic boom that shakes the earth. But there are no jets in the sky. There are no storms on the radar. There is no military training exercise. The phenomenon is named after Seneca Lake in New York, where similar sounds were reported in the 1850s, famously described by author James Fenimore Cooper. However, the most intense activity occurs in the woods near Wilmington and the Outer Banks of North Carolina. The sound is so powerful that it has been known to shatter windows in isolated cabins and knock hikers off their feet. The United States Geological Survey (USGS) has investigated the Seneca Guns for decades. They have ruled out earthquakes, as the seismographs often show no ground movement corresponding to the sound. They have ruled out temperature inversions and secret aircraft. So, what is making the noise? Some geologists theorize it is the sound of the continental shelf collapsing underwater. Massive landslides on the ocean floor that displace water and air with such force that the sound travels hundreds of miles inland. Others suggest it is the release of methane gas from the deep earth, exploding when it hits the atmosphere. But the locals have a different explanation. The legends dating back to the colonial era say that the booms are the ghosts of lost colonies, or the sound of the earth itself groaning under the weight of history. Whatever the cause, imagine walking alone in a silent pine forest, miles from civilization, and suddenly hearing the deafening blast of a cannon fire that shakes your bones, only to look around and see absolutely nothing. The third sound brings us to the quiet, hardwood forests of central Connecticut. This is a mystery that predates the United States itself. It is located in a small town named Moody's. To the modern tourist, it is a quaint village. But to the Wongonk tribe, who lived there for thousands of years, it was a place of fear. They named the area Machimudus, which translates to the place of bad noises. Since the early 1600s, settlers and indigenous people alike have reported hearing strange, rhythmic thumping sounds coming from beneath the earth. It does not sound like an earthquake, which is typically a deep, grinding roar. The Mudis noises are described as stone thunder. It sounds like a heavy boulder being rolled down a wooden bowling alley directly underneath your feet. Or, in some accounts, like a massive, subterranean pistol shot. In 1729, a Puritan reverend named Stephen Hosmer wrote a letter describing the phenomenon. He stated that the tremblings and groans were so violent that they shook the houses and caused the chimneys to crack. The Puritans, lacking seismographs, turned to theology. They believed that the woods of Mudis were the home of the devil, and the sounds were the noises of demons forging chains in the deep dark to bind the souls of sinners. Modern science offers a theory, but it is not entirely comforting. Geologists classify Mudis as a zone of micro-earthquakes. The bedrock here is unusually brittle and shallow. When the crust shifts, it doesn't just vibrate, it snaps. The sound waves are amplified by the specific shape of the valley, creating a natural acoustic speaker system that blasts the sound of cracking rock into the air. However, hikers and campers in the nearby Machimudus State Park report that the sound has a terrifying quality. It is unpredictable. You can be sleeping in a tent, in total silence, and suddenly hear a violent crack from the ground that vibrates through your sleeping bag. It is a reminder that the earth is not solid, and beneath the thin layer of soil and roots, there are massive forces grinding against each other, screaming to be let out. The fourth sound takes us back to the deep, tangled hollows of the Appalachian Mountains. This is not a geological event. It is a biological horror. It is the phenomenon of the mimic. In the survival guide of the deep woods, there is a rule that is never written down, but always understood. If you hear a baby crying in a remote thicket, miles from the nearest road, do not investigate. If you hear a woman screaming for help in a tone that sounds flat or repetitive, lock your doors. And most importantly, if you hear your own name being called by a voice that sounds exactly like your hiking partner, do not answer until you have visually confirmed where they are. Biologically, mimicry is a common trait. Birds like the lyrebird or the mockingbird can imitate chainsaws, camera shutters, and other animals. But the reports from the Appalachians suggest a predator that has evolved to mimic human distress. Evolutionary biology tells us that predators exploit the weaknesses of their prey. If a human hears a roar, their instinct is to run away. That is a failed hunt. But humans have a unique weakness, empathy. If a human hears a cry for help, or the voice of a child, their instinct is to run toward the sound. Search and rescue teams in the Great Smoky Mountains have off-the-record stories of following a distinct, clear voice calling for help deep into dangerous terrain. They will track the sound for hours, leading them into box canyons or to the edge of cliffs. And then, the sound simply stops. Or worse, it shifts location instantly, appearing behind them, laughing. Survivors who have encountered this phenomenon often describe the voice as having a digital or metallic quality. It sounds like a recording being played back. It lacks the breath and the tremor of a real human throat. It is a biological tape recorder, capturing the sounds of hikers and playing them back to lure the curious into the kill zone. There is a chilling account from a solo hiker on the Appalachian Trail near the Tennessee border. He was setting up camp when he heard his mother's voice calling him for dinner. His mother had been dead for 5 years. The voice was coming from a dense patch of rhododendrons. It wasn't a ghostly whisper. It was conversational, loud, and insistent. The hiker abandoned his gear and hiked 5 miles in the dark to get to a shelter. He knew that whatever was in those bushes was not his mother, but something that had pulled a memory from his mind to use as bait. The fifth sound takes us to the high desert forests of New Mexico, specifically around the town of Taos. This is not a sudden explosion like the Seneca Guns, nor is it a biological scream. It is a persistent, invasive drone known as the Taos hum. Since the early 1990s, residents and visitors have reported hearing a low-frequency humming noise. It is often described as the sound of a massive diesel engine idling in the distance. You can hear it, you can feel the vibration in your chest, but you can never find the source. If you walk toward it, the volume does not increase. It seems to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. What makes the Tao's hum truly terrifying is not the sound itself, but its inescapability. It is estimated that only 2% of the population can hear it. These people are called hearers. For them, the hum is a form of torture. It is louder at night. It penetrates walls. And most disturbingly, earplugs do not stop it. This suggests that the sound is not acoustic in the traditional sense, but perhaps electromagnetic, vibrating the fluid in the inner ear, or interacting directly with the brain tissue. Skeptics dismiss it as tinnitus, but tinnitus is a high-pitched ringing. The hum is a low, thrumming bass. Theories range from secret military experiments with extremely low frequency waves used to communicate with submarines, to the friction of the Earth's crust, shifting whatever the cause. The hum has driven people to depression, insanity, and suicide. It is a sound that reminds you that silence is a luxury, and for some, it is a luxury that has been permanently revoked. And finally, the sixth sound is perhaps the most dangerous, because it does not sound scary. It sounds inviting. It is the phenomenon of the bells and the whistles. In the archives of the missing, 411 cases investigations into unexplained disappearances in national parks, there is a recurring detail that is often overlooked. Before a person vanishes, they, or the people with them, often report hearing strange metallic sounds. Hunters in the deep backcountry of Montana and Washington state have reported hearing the distinct sound of a bell like a silver dinner bell or a sleigh bell ringing in the middle of the wilderness, miles from the nearest road. There is no trail, there are no other hikers, just the clear, rhythmic ringing of a bell moving through the trees. Even more common is the whistling. A hunter will whistle to signal his partner. He hears a whistle back. He assumes it is his friend. He whistles again. The response comes again, but closer, much closer. He realizes too late that the speed at which the source is moving is impossible for a human navigating dense brush. This connects to the ancient folklore of the Fae, or the spirits of the forest. In almost every culture, there is a warning. Do not follow the music. Do not follow the bells. These sounds are auditory hallucinations, or sophisticated mimicry designed to disorient the traveler. They lure you off the path. They make you believe civilization is just over the next ridge. You follow the sound of the bell, walking further and further into the trap, until the sound stops, and you realize you have walked into a place where the trail and the way home no longer exists. The woods are defined by their silence, but as we have seen, they are not quiet. From the linguistic complexity of the Sierra sounds to the earth-shaking booms of the Seneca Guns, from the subterranean cracking of Moodis to the maddening drone of Taos, these 6 sounds remind us that our senses can be used against us. We rely on our hearing to keep us safe, but in the deep wilderness, there are things that know this. They know we are listening, and they know exactly what to say to make us step into the dark.